what the hell is a stablecoin and how's this going to help the American or the US dollar? I'm down on a business trip here in Colombia. By the time I was 40 years old, my wife and I were worth multiple $1 million. We've got 4 children. And by slowly picking away at this complex financial scene, we've been able to figure things out, and hopefully this is going to help you. So when we're looking at stable coins, essentially, we've got to visit, and I'm filming this on July 14th, we've got to visit a really, really important act that just got passed by the Senate and is being voted on today, July 14th, by the House. And this is the Genius Act, okay? And so if we're looking at Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had actually even stated the stable coins could pose a huge, huge productive aspect for the US dollar and possibly for the US economy. Now, what does this mean for a normal person who's, barely getting by? I think the way that we have to look at this is what a stable coin is that it has to be backed by a short-term treasury, which means there has to be basically a dollar for dollar for this stable coin. So someone like JP Morgan, Amazon, Walmart, they're looking into doing this right now as we speak. They would look into creating a stable coin. Okay, so let's say it's like the Walmart coin. They create this coin, but they have to purchase, it has to be backed dollar for dollar based off this Genius Act. If it does get passed, it has to be backed in real assets. Okay, so it can't just be like some voodoo money. It can't just be like everybody's sort of initial vision of what crypto was. So they have to actually purchase a short-term treasury to back it up so that it exists somewhere and there is actual financial backing. Now, what does that mean? That means that these companies, okay, and if we look at a company like Tether or Circle, Circle just IPO'd a month ago and has gone, they're trading at 100x EBITDA. So these are companies that are stable coin based, okay, and they essentially, what they end up doing is they purchase they end up trading quite a bit of these stable coins, Ethereum and stuff like this, and they end up providing a little bit more stability for the crypto market. Now, where does this have to do with anything related to a normal person or even to the economy? Where this goes down, okay, is that if I'm from a macro perspective, if I want to purchase something, let's say, and actually the Kansas City Fed exchange just reported on this, is that if you're using a stable coin, a company like Stripe, if I use a stable coin on Stripe, I will get half of the return fees as a merchant. So we actually use Stripe in my one business. And if something happens, there's a lot less fees. So there's two things here. It's easier, in theory, it's easier to transact a stable coin. And the other thing is now because of the Genius Act, it's going to be more, it should be more stable as well. And if we look at, as we start to look at the US dollar, right now the US dollar is like 27% of the world trade, okay? Most of 27% of the trades in the world are using the US dollar. Essentially with stable coins, this would be backed up to like 100% basically. Like 100% of stable coins would be backed by the US dollar because of this Genius Act. Now, the interesting part here as well is that Jerome Powell actually has a huge impact on this stuff getting pushed through because he's enabling banks to hold crypto. He wants this to happen. So this is the interesting play here, is that Scott Bessent, Trump himself, they want stable coins to move forward. They want the US to be on the forefront of it, because if we can control a massive amount of this, it's going to be positive. On top of that, the rise of AI is now going to be built upon these things. And then we're going to be looking, this helps me dive deeper into the aspects of Fundstrat, who is an investment firm that Tom Lee is in charge of. And they recently even stated that they see stable coins and even Ethereum rising in the immediate time, 20+%, and easily getting up to $10,000. This is between Ethereum and Bitcoin. Now, what ends up occurring, what I think this means for a normal person, okay, so for you and I, if we're looking at stable coins, okay, and we want to transact, we want to buy something from Europe, or we want to buy something or there's a company that we want to buy something from like Amazon, and they have their own stable coin, and then they run discounts when you're purchasing product and stuff, it's Prime Day, and you get 1.5 the action on the stable coin. Now, this stuff is usually, almost all of this is going to be built on Ethereum, okay? So the layer 1 or layer 2 is going to be Ethereum that they're using to create their own stable coins. So this is going to have an impact on like 3 different levels. You're going to see someone like Bitmine or Tom Lee, who's creating a treasury reserve essentially for Ethereum in the same way that Michael Saylor did this for Bitcoin. And those companies end up having a positive reflexive relationship where they make the Ethereum investment. It creates more stability for the Ethereum blockchain, and then in turn, Ethereum rises. Okay, the value of it rises, and then more people transact on Ethereum, and it's sort of just this real simple rolling cycle, right? And so we'll see more companies like Circle pop up and Tether, where they'll go to the moon pretty quickly, because their market cap is only around, I think with Circle right now it's at like 50 billion, something like that. And when you listen to Tom Lee talk about these things, he's saying, dude, these are going to be a $2 trillion market cap in the next 3 to 5 years, possibly, like very quickly, because now with these acts being passed, and also not only with these bills being passed, but also people are just going to start to have much more confidence in the blockchains, specifically in Ethereum, and then these companies are going to start to use them quite a bit more, and in turn buy those short-term treasuries. So what does this mean for a normal human being, right, that's just trying to scratch the surface and make sure that we can get to the next level? I think the big factor for me personally is looking at Ethereum as an investment, looking at a company like Circle, they're just skyrocketing, trying to look at Robinhood, looking at these companies and what they're doing in the future, looking at AI companies like AMD, and what are they going to be doing in regard to these stable coins? What type of infrastructure are they going to be trying to build for these companies? Those are some of the big things I'm thinking about from a big long-term perspective. From the immediate term, it doesn't really change much for us. We've got to make sure that we're making more money than we spend, right? So we've got to increase our value. We've got to increase what we're bringing in on a weekly basis. We've got to make sure that we're cutting costs. We've got to make sure that we're getting everything lined up so that we can in turn have our, line up our Roth, line up our retirement funds, make sure that we have the rainy day fund, the emergency fund lined up, so that then we don't FOMO into purchasing some stupid freaking meme coin. And I think that's one thing here that's interesting, is that with the rise in value of the blockchain with Ethereum, and maybe a little bit even to the point Solana, as these start to rise in value and stable coins become a much more like regularly used thing, I feel like meme coins might slowly disappear, because they're just going to be literally a freaking meme. So when we're thinking through all this, we got to make sure that we've got the emergency fund set up, we've got our bills paid, we're making more money than we're spending, we're putting all the money into the retirement. And then what I think we can do, and this is actually, Tom Lee had mentioned this, is that because these things are going to start to appear on like banks are going to start to use them, banks are going to start to ask you if you want to buy them. And Michael Saylor even said at one point, when we start to see banks buying Bitcoin and buying crypto and partaking in the crypto space, that's when Bitcoin's going to go to the moon. I think he even quoted like $1 million. Well, that's going to be a long ways off. But for us, if you still have money left over, personally, I'm thinking about looking at it and going, all right, I've got a little bit of money that I can deploy. I'm putting most of it into a couple specific stocks, 3 specific stocks. But at the same time, I might start to look a little bit more deeper. I have a handful of Ethereum, and I might start to invest a little bit further in that. But all these things come with a risk, and it's something that you've got to decide what you want to do long term. I just wanted to share this because we're starting to see a really, really interesting aspect here where Tom Lee's BitMine company is going to be partaking in becoming a massive treasury hold for Ethereum, which is going to drastically increase that value. And these companies essentially trade, now they will be able to trade on the dollar at basically zero cost because of the volatility. They will be able to, it's essentially the same model of what Michael Saylor has done. So for us, it's risky, okay? It's still risky, but we have to stay up to date on it, and we have to be aware of it, and we have to look at where things are going to go, and we have to make sure that we don't FOMO with everything, but more so play that long game, make sure that you're making more money. That's all that matters. Make more money than you spend, and then slowly pick away at all the strategic moves, and just remember those risks that you've got to take on for yourself. I hope this helps somebody out there, because this is a complex thing, but look up the Genius Act. They're voting on that today in the House. Peace.